Moving quickly to execute the plans we had put in place to respond to every constituency, including and contingency.
He says he made contingency plans for this. Bullshit. No, he did not. I will always say somebody is stupid rather than perverse, but this is stupidity bordering on the perverse. Joe Biden, yesterday, he gave a speech, and his speech was supposed to lay out the rationale for this. Remember, he was off in Camp David. He had called a lid. Joe Biden had no plans to actually speak to the American public until like Wednesday or Thursday, because after all, Joe Biden was eating ice cream and watching Matlock up in Camp David. He couldn't be bothered. All he did over the weekend was release a photo of himself, a pathetic-looking photo of himself alone in the Situation Room, talking via conference call with all of the generals who had already advised him not to do this, and then monitoring the collapse of Afghanistan in real time. Well, finally, he flew back to Washington, D.C. He did a little speech at the White House, and then he took like 3 questions, and then he left. And that was it. Because here's the thing about your caring, grandfatherly, empathetic, old man president. He does not give one damn about the people we made promises to. He doesn't care that Americans are still stuck in Afghanistan right now, somewhere between 5 and 10,000 of them. He does not care that tens of thousands, when I say tens of thousands, I mean probably at least 100,000 people who are connected to the Afghan government, who are our allies, people who worked on intelligence with us, people who served in the Afghan military with the United States military and their families. Those people are stuck there, and they will remain stuck there. And Joe Biden does not give a bleep. For Captain Humanitarian Policy over here, it turns out he doesn't care. It doesn't matter one iota to him, because in the end, he's just a venal, corrupt old politician. That's all he is. That's all he ever was. He was never Captain Empathy. Now, I've said 1,000 times that you should not look to politicians for empathy. Right? If you're looking to politicians for empathy, you're looking in the wrong place, because politics shouldn't be about empathy. Politics should be about making hard-headed decisions. But that's the thing. Joe Biden's decision here wasn't even hard-headed realpolitik. It was not a realist foreign policy decision. His decision here was very simple. He was going to abandon Afghanistan come hell or high water, and hell and high water have come. Okay, so he made the speech yesterday, and it was notable for its complete lack of honesty. The number of lies that Joe Biden told in the speech, it beggars the imagination. The number of prevarications, the I've never seen a president congratulate himself on a greater failure than this. And this is as though Gerald Ford had called a presser after the abandonment of Saigon and then congratulated himself for his bravery in abandoning millions of people to the evils of the Viet Cong. Remember, Afghanistan, by the way, is 38 million people live in Afghanistan. But that's exactly what Joe Biden did. Joe Biden did a press conference where he blamed every single person other than himself, everyone, as we will see. He blamed everyone for the decision that he alone made in precipitous fashion, against the advice of his generals, against the advice of his intelligence authorities, against the advice of all prior presidents. He made this call. He owns this call, but he tried to blame everybody else, and he patted himself on the back as a man of high moral character for having abandoned people the United States made commitments to. We're running out of allies to betray here. We've betrayed the Kurds. We've betrayed the people of Hong Kong. We've done nothing for the dissidents in Iran. We've done nothing for the dissidents in Cuba. And now we've allowed people who we actively engaged with, people we actively encouraged to fight back against the Taliban. And by the way, they did. 50,000 Afghan military members have been killed in the last 7 years alone fighting against the Taliban. So when you hear all these people saying the Afghan military wasn't willing to fight, we were fighting their war for them. The United States has not been in an active combat role in Afghanistan since 2014, when NATO officially stopped doing that. Last year, since February 8th, 2020, the United States has not lost a soldier in combat. Not one. And we were losing either low double digits or single digits numbers of soldiers in combat in Afghanistan year on year since 2014. Meanwhile, the Afghan military was taking tens of thousands of casualties. So the notion that the Afghan military has been doing nothing over the past few years is just a lie. We'll discuss that in just a second because, again, Joe Biden blamed the Afghan military for decisions he himself made. But we begin at the beginning with Joe Biden's pathetic, mewling, disgusting speech. I mean, this is really one of the most disreputable speeches I've ever seen an American president give. It is despicable. It is morally despicable. It is a despicable lie through and through. So let's start at the beginning. First, he starts with an open lie. He says he made contingency plans for this. No, he did not. He didn't even come close to making contingency plans for this. Here was Joe Biden just lying right out the gate here.
My national security team and I have been closely monitoring the situation on the ground in Afghanistan and moving quickly to execute the plans we had put in place to respond to every constituency, including and contingency, including the rapid collapse we're seeing now.
Okay, you had no plans for the rapid collapse we're seeing now. In fact, Joe Biden would later admit that. By the way, what were those plans exactly? I mean, let's go through what's exactly been happening in Afghanistan over the last several days. Remember, this administration said that the Taliban would not take over the country, period, as of July. Antony Blinken said, like a few weeks ago, there would be no situation in which the Taliban, over the course of a weekend, took over Afghanistan, which is basically what they did. It took about a week, like a week and a half, from them taking over like the third biggest city in Afghanistan, to then taking over Kandahar, to then taking over Kabul. I mean, let's just go through this. We saw over the weekend helicopters taking off from the roof of the U.S. Embassy, evacuating U.S. Embassy personnel. Did he have a contingency plan for that? We saw Afghans rushing the airport. Now remember, this is because the United States decided to abandon Bagram Air Base to the predations of the Taliban. So he had no military airbase from which to fly people out. Only the Kabul airport was available. And the United States did not have enough people there to defend the Kabul airport. So people were just rushing the tarmac. You can see the Afghans climbing the walls, attempting to get in. Okay, this video, Afghans, this is stunning footage. Afghans running along with the U.S. Air Force plane, clinging to the wings of the plane. Clinging to the wing. Was that the contingency plan, Mr. President? Those are human beings sitting on the... Okay, this one is the most egregious of all, obviously. You see that dot falling right there, those two dots falling right there? Those are people. Those are human beings. Okay, this entire debacle began with human beings jumping from the Twin Towers on 9/11 after Al-Qaeda, based in Afghanistan, harbored by the Taliban, hit the Twin Towers. And now this debacle ends with Afghans falling from the wheels of American planes. Those Afghans climbed into the wheels of the American planes to try and escape the theocratic tyranny of the Taliban. By the way, another story from Politico today, body of dead Afghan found in landing gear of military jet leaving Kabul airport. The body of an Afghan so desperate to escape the country hours after Kabul fell to the Taliban was found in the landing gear of a C-17 transport aircraft hours after it hastily took off from Hamid Karzai International Airport, according to two sources familiar with the matter. The body in the aircraft's landing gear has made it temporarily inoperable, the sources said. By the way, some 7 people were killed on the tarmac because of the rush on the tarmac. Apparently, the Taliban are now going house to house and killing people. And that's the fallout. Bill Kristol tweeted this out. He's been receiving texts from people in Afghanistan. By the way, I'm getting emails from people desperately trying to get the Afghan interpreters they worked with, members of the military, who are now in the United States, trying to get members of the Afghan military who they worked with, their translators, people they worked with in the military, out of Afghanistan and receiving no support from the Biden administration in doing this. I'm getting emails about it. Bill Kristol tweeted out, I just got off the phone with somebody who recently returned from his 3rd tour in Afghanistan. He emphasized we had a responsibility, not just to translators, but to Afghan troops, pilots and special forces in particular, who'd fought bravely by our side. And he continued by pointing out that he had received a text, quote, terrorists are going door to door and killing pilots and special operating forces, raping their families, taking their houses. 2 of my friends were shot dead in Kabul. Meanwhile, just in case you didn't know what the Taliban are up to, they've also been painting out the images of women. If there are any images of women in Kabul, they're going around with white paint and they're painting over them to make sure that women are never seen again. Okay, that was the contingency plan from Joe Biden. Okay, he said that right out of the gate in this speech. That was his opening gambit, was we had a contingency plan. It's a hell of a contingency plan right there. That was just the beginning of the lies. Joe Biden continues, and he talks about, he makes the case that the United States actually accomplished its goal in Afghanistan. Okay, well, not really. Here's the thing. In order for us to accomplish our goal in Afghanistan was pretty clear, right? Our goal in Afghanistan was that we were supposed to counter terrorism. In order to do that, we have to continue to counter terrorism. The minute you stop countering terrorism, you've no longer achieved your goal. Here is Joe Biden.
We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11th, 2001, and make sure al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. We never gave up the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and we got him. That was a decade ago.
Okay, now here's the problem. How about the fact that you just reconstituted the possibility of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan? According to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, he informed Congress terror groups are likely to reconstitute in Afghanistan within the next 2 years. High probability. According to Dr. Sajan Gohil of the Asia Pacific Foundation, quoted by the BBC, there are some 250 to 500 members of al-Qaeda in Kunar, which is a heavily forested valley region of Afghanistan. Right now, we were able to monitor that place, and we were able to fight with them. No longer. Gohil now says the number is likely to increase, given the United States' lack of access to any intelligence network and its surrender of all air bases in Afghanistan. Also, Pakistan has now cut a quid pro quo with the Taliban to now reject U.S. bases on Pakistani territory. So we can't even use Pakistani territory to launch attacks against the Taliban or against al-Qaeda, which means we are back to shooting camels in the ass with cruise missiles, Bill Clinton style, from 1998. So it's pretty likely that terrorist groups are about to reconstitute quickly in Afghanistan. And I know that we live in the post-9/11 era. I know that 9/11 was sort of a blip in a lot of people's imaginations. It was 20 years ago, after all. But let's just remember that things that happen in far-off countries can have some rather radical impact in the United States. Just a reminder, this is why we went into Afghanistan in the first place. This right here. I know we don't play this footage very often anymore. I know we're not supposed to because it's upsetting and disquieting and shocking still 20 years later. That's the reason we went to Afghanistan, because 3,000 Americans were murdered on September 11th by people the Taliban were harboring. Hey, that's why we were there in the damn first place. And those same people were just ushered back into power by Joe Biden. Ushered back into power with no capacity. The United States just destroyed its own capacity to wage war on these people. That's what the United States just did. By the way, the Taliban, there's this myth out there being portrayed and perverted by the Biden administration that the Taliban is moderated. Really interesting, because like 2 years ago, the Taliban chief spokesperson was saying, al-Qaeda wasn't even behind 9/11. This is on CBS This Morning from just a couple of years ago.
More stunning was Shaheen's refusal to accept al-Qaeda's responsibility for the September 11th attacks.
So who's the real culprit behind that?
That was not known. Who? Still, it is not known. Who was behind that?
Al-Qaeda. They claimed responsibility.
No. If there is a proof given to us, we are ready to try him.
So that was just 2 years ago. The Taliban saying it was not al-Qaeda. By the way, that was their original line as well. You'll recall. So now they're back in power. They're not just back in power. They now have control of billions of dollars of U.S. military equipment, including mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, drones, Humvees. They have a lot of American intel. We didn't burn our stuff before we left. They have all that stuff because Joe Biden decided to pull out with no plan, with no forethought, because he is a moron. He is a dead-set idiot. I mean, either that or he's perverse. I mean, those are really the only two choices. And using Hanlon's razor here, I will always say somebody is stupid rather than perverse. But this is stupidity bordering on the perverse. How's this for a title? Ben Shapiro Show subscriber destroys like button with clicks and logic. I'd watch that. Make it happen, gang.